So, brothers and sisters, let us put all our attention to Brother Nick with the title, Jonah, do you do well to be angry? Brother Nick.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. There are two parts of me consistently. One that gets very excited to be up here every Sunday when I speak, and then the other part of me that is screaming into a void, wishing that he never came up here today. So my goal then is to try and be enthusiastic about this, because maybe then I can ignore the deep existential dread that's in my soul. So I'd like to ask you to give me a show of hands here. How many of you have ever been angry?
Everyone.
Everybody should be raising their hands, because everybody's been angry at least once in their life. Now let me ask you another question. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been so angry that you said something or that you did something that later caused you to ask yourself, why did I do that? Why would I say that? Why would I say that? Why would I do that? I was in that situation many years ago. My brother and I used to play on our old Xbox a lot. We used to play a lot of multiplayer games together. It was a way for us to bond together and have a little fun. Though they did ultimately tend to become pretty heated and competitive, as siblings usually tend to be. And being a younger child, I was not very good at handling my emotions very well. I think my parents can attest to that very well. I tended to lose to my brother because he was just better at games in general. And at one point when we were playing a game together, I had become so frustrated and so angry that I, perhaps unwisely, decided to throw my whole body onto the couch where my brother's hand was sitting, and I proceeded to sprain my brother's thumb pretty badly. And I got into a lot of trouble for that. And I have been regretting it ever since, because it somehow sticks with me even all these years later. So Matthew, I would like to apologize to you right now for spraining your thumb. The reason, though, that I felt guilty about it is because it was so silly for me to be getting angry at something that was just meant to be fun. It was meant to be a bonding experience, and instead I had turned it into a bad memory for myself. Did I do well to be angry in that moment? No, of course not. There were many other ways that I could have handled that situation. I could have taken deep breaths. They say to give yourself the 5-second rule. If you feel yourself getting angry, step back, give yourself 5 seconds to breathe, and let your mind think. But instead, I didn't do that. I chose an unnecessary response that had long-term repercussions for me after it happened. So what exactly is anger? What would we define anger as being? Well, according to the American Psychological Association, and I quote, "Anger is an emotion that is characterized by antagonism towards something or someone you feel has deliberately done you wrong." Now, anger can be a good thing. It can give you a way to express negative emotions, for example, or to motivate you to find solutions to your problems. But excessive anger causes problems. Increased blood pressure and other physical changes associated with anger can make it difficult to think straight and can harm your physical and mental health. Anger can be caused by both external and internal events. You could be angry at a specific person, such as a coworker or a supervisor, or an event, such as a traffic jam or a canceled flight. Or your anger could be caused by worrying and brooding about your own personal problems. Memories of traumatic and enraging events can also trigger angry feelings. And anger is the most common and recognizable feeling for everybody. Everyone has more than once gotten angry at some point in their lives. Whether it was because of something silly like losing at a video game, or something much more serious, such as getting into an argument with a friend or a family member. And oftentimes, when you're in anger, it can be difficult for you to control it. When there's so much weighing down on yourself, so much stress, depression, fear, and anxiety acting all as fuel to this fire. And it can cause you to say and do things that later you'll reflect on and say, why did I do that? That wasn't right for me to do that. To be clear, there is nothing wrong itself with just being angry. Anger is a normal emotion like any other. You are okay to be angry sometimes. The danger with anger is when it can lead you down the path of sin. I'd like for you to turn to me to Ephesians chapter 4, verses 25 to 31. In Ephesians chapter 4, Paul's writing to the Ephesians, and he tells them, "Therefore, put away falsehood. Let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he might leave something to share with everybody in need." It's okay for you to be angry. Allow yourself the time to be angry. Allow yourself the time to feel frustrated and to be upset, perhaps at whatever is bothering you in your life, whether it be the way things are with another or just the situation that the world is. But be careful to not let that anger cause you to make a choice that is perhaps not correct, making you say something or do something that you'll regret. Psalm 37, 7 through 9 has another passage for it. Psalm 37, verse 7. Be still before the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his ways, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoer shall be cut off, but those who wait in the Lord shall inherit the land. The story I would like to focus on in regards to all this is the story of Jonah. Now, Jonah's story would take place roughly around the 8th century BCE. And I'd ask that you follow with me to Jonah chapter 1. Now in Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, "Now the word of the Lord had come to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Rise and go to the city of Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish, and so he paid the fare, went down into the boat to go with them to Tarshish away from the presence of the Lord." And one question that automatically comes to my mind when I read that is why? Why would he do that? Why would Jonah attempt to try and flee from the Lord? The Lord made the heavens and the earth. He made everything. How does he expect to get away by fleeing to a land anywhere, really, on earth? Where could he go that he would escape the Lord? Why does he want to do that? Well, the question isn't answered right away, but we follow through with the story and we'll get our answer. Although technically you already got the answer spoiled to you at the beginning. Now the story progresses, and as the story goes along, there's a great storm that comes along for these men on the boat in Tarshish. And in verse 7, they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us." And so they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. And then they said to him, "Tell us on what account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? And where do you come from? What is your country, and what people are you?" And he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And then the men were exceedingly afraid, and said to him, What is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. And I find this observation also interesting as well, that these men are Gentiles. They are not Hebrews. They know that, and yet they seem to know the Lord, and they seem to know God, and they seem to live in genuine fear and respect of him. So they said to him, What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us? For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. And he said to them, Pick me up and hurl me into the sea, for the sea will quiet down for you. I know it is because of this that this great tempest has come upon you. And picking up in verse 15, so they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased its raging. And the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And I know it's a lot of reading, but I ask that you bear with me, because I do have a point with all this. In verse 17, and the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and for 3 nights. I ask that you keep that in the back of your head. That will become important in a moment. And Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and billows passed over me, and said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall look again upon your holy temple. The waters closed into me to take my life, and the deep surrounded me. The weeds wrapped about my head at the root of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought me up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fading away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you and to your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope and steadfast love. But I, with voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited out Jonah upon the dry land. So what we see here is a remarkable commitment on Jonah of a repentance, that he seems to acknowledge that what he was doing was wrong. And then in fear, he called out to the Lord, and noticed that the Lord had answered him, saving him from the great oceans and the deep, and spilling him onto the dry land. Jonah did call upon the Lord, and the Lord answered him and showed him mercy. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah again in chapter 3, verse 1. Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out the message I tell you. And so Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. Jonah went into the city, going a day's journey, and he called out, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people believed God, and they called for a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least of them. And going ahead to verse 7, the king himself issued a proclamation published through Nineveh, by the decree of the king and his nobles, let not a man, nor beast, nor herd, nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed or drink on water. But let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and let him call out mightily to God. Let everyone turn from his evil ways, from the violence in his hands. For who knows? God may yet turn and relent from his fierce anger, so that we may not perish. And when God saw what they had did, how they turned from their evil way, God relented of the disaster that he said he would do to them, and he did not do it. And so we see here a remarkable example of how normally this was not the situation, especially with the people of Israel. When prophets came to the people of Israel, telling them to repent of their ways, of their sin, they didn't listen. But here we see a people who aren't Hebrews, who aren't Jews, who hear the word of the Lord, and they almost immediately, without even thinking twice, they turned around and they repented. and they asked for mercy and for forgiveness, and the Lord gave it to him, just as he had given it to Jonah. They called upon the Lord to have mercy upon them, and he answered and showed them mercy and spared them of the disaster that he brought upon them. And yet in chapter 4, we see a strange turn. You would think that Jonah would be happy about this, that Jonah would be ecstatic that these people had listened to him and had heard the word and turned from their evil ways, and yet he wasn't. He was exceedingly displeased, and he was angry. As Brother Ramazani had read, thank you, by the way, for your word. And so we ask ourselves, so we have the answer to that question before. Why was he fleeing from the Lord? It wasn't because he knew he could get away. It's because he didn't want to preach to the people of Nineveh. He wanted his anger to be justified. Perhaps he wanted to see them punished for their evil ways. And in some ways, that's very relatable, at least for me. I see so much going on in the world, and I get so angry about what's happening, about the way that things are, and what people do and what people say. If you ever scroll online and you see something, you read something, and it just makes you upset. That's happened to me a lot. Somebody has said stuff to me when I was younger, especially going through high school, things that really made me angry. And I confess that I was a lot like Jonah, that I had wanted to see something bad had happened. I don't like feeling that way. I don't want to feel that way. Far be it from me that I should want anyone to suffer. But when you're in the midst of anger, it can blind you. It can tear your heart away and lead you to sin. Jonah should have been grateful. He should have been happy for these people, that they had turned from their evil ways and that they had repented. And yet his anger had blinded to him. But God brings up a good point. Do you do well to be angry? Not just that, is it right for you to be angry? Is it good for you? Is it healthy for you to be angry? Is there another way to go? Is there another way to let go of the anger and find a better solution? Well, remember that prayer that Jonah himself had said? He describes being in the fish like being in Sheol, which is the grave. And after 3 days and 3 nights of being in that grave, he repented of his ways and he was spat back out. Does that sound familiar to you? Follow me to Matthew chapter 12. This is Matthew chapter 12, verses 39 to 42. He answered to the Pharisees, "An evil and adulterous generation will seek a sign, but no sign will be given to it except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and nights in the belly of the great fish, so too will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And behold, something greater than Jonah is here." Jesus has shown us a better example, a better way to live our lives, a better example through his words and his deeds. Wait 1 moment. It says we're not in order. Shoot. I completely forgot my order of verses. Jesus had shown us, though, the better way through the fruit of the Spirit, these things being love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Wish I knew where I put my verse here. Shoot. I was looking for the one where he was the greatest. Oh, and now I found it. Wouldn't that be my luck? It is verse 34 in chapter 22. But when the Pharisees had heard together, he silenced the Sadducees, and he gathered them. And one of them went to question him, a lawyer. And he said to them, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" And he said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend on all the law and the prophets." And again, we see here that sign that he shows to us. He shows to us a better way. Love your neighbor as yourself. If someone slaps you across the face, turn the other cheek. Have patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I will close to you today with Psalm 30. Psalm 30, 4 through 5. Sing praises to the Lord, O you his saints, and give thanks to his holy name. For his anger is but a moment, and his favor for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning.